Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Joshua Barnes, live from the Firstpost studios. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Ukraine says at least 9 people have been killed in the latest Russian attacks across multiple regions. This as President Zelensky lands in Turkey for Ukraine peace talks with no Russian participation. China halts Japanese seafood imports and pauses new film releases in response to Prime Minister Takaichi's remarks on Taiwan. The search operation intensifies in Nigeria for 24 missing schoolgirls abducted from a boarding school in Kebbi State. President Bola Tinubu assures that the perpetrators behind the kidnapping will face justice. Malaysia confirms losing over $1 billion worth of electricity in the last 5 years to illegal cryptocurrency mining. The country's energy ministry says the theft poses a serious threat to the national energy supply system. And Colombia's most wanted guerrilla leader threatens to disrupt the country's 2026 presidential election in response to recent military strikes against his armed group. We begin today in South Africa. Johannesburg is days away from hosting the G20 Summit, the first ever leaders meeting on African soil. While the host nation is pitching this as a historic moment for the continent, the shadow of a US boycott hangs over the weekend gathering. Washington has announced that no US official will attend, with President Donald Trump accusing South Africa of human rights abuses and repeating discredited claims about white South Africans being targeted. The Trump administration has also rejected South Africa's summit priorities, which include promoting global solidarity, clean energy transitions, and a strong declaration on climate and debt relief for developing nations. In Johannesburg, last-minute preparations have been intense. Drone shots show the massive expo centre in Nasrec, the summit venue, and posters of world leaders lining the walls, but with one noticeable empty spot where the US president's image would have been. City crews have been fixing streetlights, repairing potholes and clearing waterlogged roads in low-income suburbs.
We are ready to receive our guests, heads of states, who will be descending to Johannesburg. We have made sure, as part of our work, that our infrastructure continue to be proper. Yes, there are challenges there and there. We have focused on them, especially for the visit. And there are also those issues that requires us that even beyond the G20, we continue with maintenance. We continue to ensure that street traffic lights are working, streets are proper, there are no potholes. So we'll continue to do that and maintain our infrastructure.
Security rehearsals are also underway, with Metro Police and traffic units running large-scale drills around the routes world leaders will take through the city. South Africa's Foreign Minister, Ronald Lamola, has downplayed the US absence, insisting this is not a snub.
We did our best to accommodate them, and they did come back into some of the meetings. At some point, it was indicated that they will be fully participants, and including at the Leaders Summit, that they will be represented at the Vice President level. But they have now decided out of their own volition and not being pushed out of the G20 by South Africa.
And as leaders prepare to arrive, the G20 Social Summit, the civil society wing of the G20, has already kicked off with striking visuals in Johannesburg. Traditional dance performances on stage and thousands of delegates packed into a colourful plenary hall. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa's deputy opened the summit, emphasising its role in ensuring that grassroots voices reach G20 leaders.
Confident that the leaders of the G20 who will be participating this weekend will consider issues coming from the social summit very seriously. because these are not issues coming from one or two organizations. You can see we had more than 4,000 delegates here, people coming from not only South Africa, but also in the African continent, NGOs globally. So this is a very important voice that should not be ignored, and I'm sure the leaders will not ignore this.
The G20 Summit begins this weekend, with South Africa determined to deliver a meeting that reflects African priorities, even as the US boycott shifts the global balance in the room. And for more on this, we have with us Khanyi Magubane, a political analyst joining us live from the host city of this year's G20 Summit, Johannesburg. Thank you for joining us.
A very good afternoon to you and your viewers.
This is a hugely historic moment. An African nation is hosting the G20 Summit for the first time ever, but with the backdrop of this controversial US absence and claims of a white genocide. Can you tell us what the perspective is of the South African people?
Thank you very much. Well, given the recent US-South Africa relations, which have been quite tense since the beginning of the year, when the narrative about the genocide against Afrikaners, and I have to just correct Firstpost, you said that against white South Africans, but it's a specific group of white people called Afrikaners who are of Dutch descent, and they are the ones that have been engaging the White House and have been peddling this narrative of a genocide against Afrikaners, which of course has been discredited and has found to be untrue. However, the US government on the back of that has since decided not to attend the the G20 summit on the back of those genocide claims. Now, we know that initially the US government had said that Deputy President J.D. Vance would attend the G20 summit and that he would be accompanied by a high-level delegation. And it was just about 2 weeks ago when the President Trump almost on the spot decided that no official of the US administration would be attending the G20 summit. However, in subsequent days, it's becoming clear that the decision may not have been very well thought over, given the fact that the US is going to be hosting the summit next year, and there has to be a handover from one country to another. And in between that, at the end of the summit, there has to be a summit declaration, which is taken by all the leaders present. Now, the South African view has been that this has been a very, very, I would say, disappointing moment for us, because the US is undermining an African country that is hosting the G20 summit for the very first time. They are, of course, in my opinion, not so confident that they're going to come here and find a genocide. They know there's no genocide, and I think they're avoiding the embarrassment of coming to South Africa and actually seeing that there's no genocide. However, it's coming back to bite them, because now the US government has been in touch with Pretoria, the South African embassy, in terms of threatening them that South Africa and the leaders attending should not even attempt to adopt a summit declaration without them. And my question is, if you want to be included in those talks that eventually lead to a summit declaration that, of course, is based on the summit discussion topics, why not be here? This is very similar to somebody refusing to come to a person's birthday party when they've been invited to, but threatens that you can't cut the cake without me. If you wanted to be there, that's where they should have been. The US should have been here.
Yes, and building on that, does the US boycott impact the significance of the summit? And how do you think the Ramaphosa government is aiming to counter the US absence?
Well, let's look at the big discussion topics that will be taking place in the summit this year. Climate change is definitely a big topic and of interest that's going to be taking place as the world takes resolutions toward meeting those climate change goals that we have. As the world, we have also issues of debt cancellation and debt issues. Africa owes institutions such as the World Bank and the IMF of trillions of dollars, and this has kept Africa enslaved, to the West, and this is also going to be very high on the agenda. Issues of digital development and AI is also going to be quite high on the agenda, and I think that these are issues that the American government could have actually had a lot to contribute to, and that's why I'm saying that I think it's starting to bite America in the butt, that they may have been a bit too hasty and too impulsive in taking this decision not to attend the summit, or the president himself may have taken quite an impulsive decision, because ultimately it is clear that they were quite very I would say they were essential to be here, and without them, the summit will continue without the American voice. And it's quite sad, because next year they have to host themselves and there has to be continuity. But we're going to see a break in continuity. I think the South African government has made it very clear that they're not going to send the handover file to America. America has to come and fetch it. And if they don't, then they are going to have to host the G20 summit without a handover officially from South Africa.
Yes, and Kanye, of course, we've heard Trump talk about BRICS and the growing South, saying that policies are anti-American, imposing further tariffs as well. Could this be seen potentially as an opportunity for the growing South, because US representation won't be there?
Well, let's talk about the countries that are not coming. Russia, Mexico, Argentina are all sending delegations, even though they are not sending their heads of state. So they will have a presence. America is the only country that will have absolutely no officials from the Trump administration attending. The other countries who've actually indicated that their presidents are not coming will still be present. So issues of the BRICS summit and the economic bloc getting stronger will once again be strengthened, by the US's refusal to attend the G20 summit. Already we've heard from our foreign minister, Ronald Damula, who gave a breakdown of who will be attending. And we have 20 heads of states, we have 16 visiting guest countries, and we also have guests that have been invited from the Caribbean and from the other African countries. This is going to be one of the most inclusive G20 summits that has ever been held, which has been described by America as a G100, taking a swipe at the inclusivity that the South African government has created around this. They've actually given an indication earlier today through some of their officials that next year they're going to be trimming down the G20 summit. It will only be the essential countries that are coming there. So we are most likely to see Africa being left out once again next year. We are most likely to see a lot of exclusion of third world countries, and we are most likely to see a reversal of some of the gains and declarations that will be taken this year, which will then mean that there really won't be any sustainable continuity from South Africa to the United States.
Kanye, thank you ever so much for your time. Of course, all eyes will be on this summit this weekend in Johannesburg. We look forward to seeing that, and thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you so much.
Let's shift focus to Eswatini. The country is facing tough questions over a secret immigration deal with the United States. The deal, $5 million to accept deportees from the US, even if they were not citizens of Eswatini. The agreement was reportedly signed in May in the country's capital. On paper, it was framed in the United States to boost border and migration management. In reality, it allowed the US to send up to 160 third country nationals to Eswatini. So far, at least 15 deportees have been sent to the African nation from places like Vietnam, Cuba, Yemen and Laos. The first group of 5 men arrived in July. Then in October, the second batch of deportees was sent. Most of them are being held in high security prisons. Eswatini's finance minister confirmed the $5 million payments in the parliament. But he also admitted something unusual. He claimed he wasn't told about the deal until after it was done. The money was placed in the National Disaster Management Agency's account, but the NDMA says it was never authorised to use the money. Human rights activists say the deal was unconstitutional because the parliament was never consulted. They want the courts to immediately halt any further transfers.
We want this matter to be transparent because we are the ones who pay the taxes. When we see people coming in, we get surprised and wonder whose money will feed them. But now we are hearing rumors, and rumors are not good, and that the US has given us money. But let them just tell us straight that we had this agreement, and based on Constitution, it is required that this should take into Parliament and discussed, agree in Parliament, and that's when they should be signing those agreements that affect us Swatis.
For many, the problem isn't just secrecy. It's also the fear that comes along with bringing deportees that are labelled as dangerous criminals by the United States. Prison officials insist that security is always tight, but families in nearby communities worry about inmates escaping.
I will go back and say that we have seen people escape there at maximum. So even that our kids, when they now appear with that criminality from Europe and learn what is now advanced, and when they come out, they come back to us. It is very painful that there will be criminals from elsewhere and come and cause us problems here. One day when we hear that someone has escaped, and how is our government thinking? Tell us, the one who stay here, we have kids here.
But it's not just citizens of Eswatini. South Africa has raised red flags too. Eswatini shares a long and open border with its neighbour, and officials in Pretoria have flagged concerns about deportees crossing over from Eswatini through that porous border. Washington has refused to give any further details. It simply calls the arrangement part of Trump-era immigration enforcement, a policy that focuses on offshoring responsibilities to partner nations. What remains unclear, who in Eswatini had signed the order. There have been multiple reports and controversies surrounding the Trump administration's deportation strategy. A country that's at the centre of it is Rwanda. According to reports, the US government even paid $100,000 to Rwanda just to take in one Iraqi man. This was reportedly a pilot program to see if deportations to other countries could work. Other African nations who have signed deportation agreements with the US include Ghana and South Sudan. So for now, the money and the deportees are both in Eswatini, and the legal fight has just started. And whether this partnership survives relies on Eswatini's constitutional bench and how much transparency the government is willing to offer. Let's now shift focus to Northwest Africa, where Algeria has shown willingness to back mediation over the long-running territorial disputes of Western Sahara. Algiers has pointed towards finding a long-term solution.
Algeria will spare no effort to support any mediation initiative between the two parties to the conflict, provided it falls within the UN framework and is based on the fundamentals of a just, lasting, and definitive solution.
This comes after the United Nations Security Council backed Morocco's plan for the territory that would provide West Sahara autonomy under the kingdom's sole sovereignty. This after an initiative from US President Donald Trump. And the proposal has some backing from within Western Sahara.
We are already enjoying this autonomy as Sahrawi people, as we live it today, in this large region. But what does the autonomy plan mean for us? It means that we become responsible and that we live off our own resources. It means having elected officials, a parliament, and a government that manages this region under the autonomy plan. This means that we are now the ones who manage our local affairs.
Now, a resolution to this border dispute would mean an end to half a century of tension, uncertainty, and conflict. Western Sahara is a vast mineral-rich region that is largely controlled by Morocco. The coastal desert was under Spanish rule until 1975 and was later annexed by Morocco. The Algeria-backed Polisario Front, which is an armed group seeking full independence for the Sahrawi people, has long contested the Moroccan claim to the territory. This led to bitter fighting in the 1970s and 80s, with the Polisario Front and Morocco agreeing to various ceasefires in the 1990s. But both failed to resolve the underlying dispute. The UN themselves have deployed peacekeepers in the region since 1991, with a referendum on Moroccan rule or independence never materialising. And the UNSC resolution, now with support from Algeria, could see this chapter closed. but the route to a resolution is still not clear. The Polisario Front has categorically rejected the UNCS resolution, still demanding the referendum agreed under the 1991 ceasefire. But with their major backer Algeria now promoting mediation efforts, it will be interesting to see if a compromise can be reached. A proposal of genuine autonomy could present a real chance for a lasting resolution. But, as history has shown, the road to diplomacy in Western Sahara is not a simple one. Nigeria is at the centre of a global debate. A conversation about security and faith in West Africa took an unexpected turn when an unusual voice stepped into the discussion.
In Nigeria, Christians are being targeted, driven from their homes, and killed. Churches have been burned. Families have been torn apart, and entire communities live in fear constantly, simply because of how they pray.
Yes, that is Nicki Minaj speaking at the United Nations. She took the stage during an interfaith event hosted by the US Embassy. Standing with diplomats and faith leaders, she framed the crisis as a basic human rights issue, not a political stance.
And I want to be clear. Protecting Christians in Nigeria is not about taking sides. This is about standing up in the face of injustice. It's about what I've always stood for my entire career, and I will continue to stand for that for the rest of my life.
Minaj then thanked world leaders who have raised the alarm, including US President Donald Trump.
I would like to thank President Trump for prioritizing this issue and for his leadership on the global stage in calling for urgent action to defend Christians in Nigeria, to combat extremism, and to bring a stop to violence against those who simply want to exercise their natural right to freedom of religion or belief.
Her comments landed in the middle of an already heated moment. Just days earlier, Trump made sharp claims about mass killings of Christians in Nigeria and hinted at possible military options.
Could be. I mean, a lot of things I envisage, a lot of things. They're killing record numbers of Christians in Nigeria. And they have other countries very bad also. You know that part of the world, very bad. They're killing the Christians and killing them in very large numbers. We're not going to allow that to happen.
He escalated his rhetoric further online. On Truth Social, Trump warned Nigeria to act quickly or risk losing US assistance, even floating direct intervention. The African Union responded sharply, rejecting any claim of genocide in northern Nigeria. And Nigeria's government dismissed the allegations as well. Abuja says it continues to fight extremism and protect all citizens, regardless of faith. Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu issued his own response, insisting Nigeria remains committed to religious freedom. The Nigerian government also warned against isolating one set of victims. As the African Union stated, Boko Haram's 15-year insurgency has killed tens of thousands of people, most of them Muslims. But human rights groups note that both communities have suffered. Christian communities have also been hit hard. In 2022, Al-Shabaab terrorists opened fire during a mass in Owo, killing at least 50 people. The violence is part of a wider pattern across an already fragile region. Ethnic tensions, banditry and extremism all feed into the bloodshed. Nigeria is one of Africa's most influential countries, and now Nicki Minaj has pushed the issue into the global spotlight. Her message was simple: protect people of faith, wherever they live. The world may disagree on terms, but Nigerians continue to live with the reality. That's it on the show. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, thanks for watching.